Hi folks, in this video I'll walk through using containers to start a Jekyll site and then deploying it to GitHub Pages. Jekyll allows you to build a static site or a blog. GitHub Pages provide a free hosting for websites about you, your organization, or your projects. I'm going to start out with the project template that contains some shell scripts along with container configuration files. This project template assumes Docker and Docker Compose is already installed. The first thing I'll do is update the Docker file to build from a Ruby image. The Docker store has a Ruby image that is maintained by the Docker team, so we will just go with that as our base image. At the time of this recording, the latest version available is Ruby 2.4.1, so we'll update our Docker file to use the Ruby image tagged at 2.4.1. After updating the Docker file, we'll run the Bootstrap script to pull in the image and build our containers. The download might take a while the first time, but after the Docker engine has downloaded the image, each subsequent time we build our containers, we won't have to sit through the download again. After the script finishes, we can inspect that the image was downloaded to our machine. We can also see that certain packages were installed. I included spellcheck in each project to lint test the shell scripts, but you don't necessarily need it for your project. The script then goes to change the working directory of the container, and after that copies in the files from the current directory of our host system. These steps are all specified in our Docker file. At this point, our container has a pretty plain Ruby environment. We can then start a bash session in our container, and once inside the container, we will have access to the Ruby environment to use bundler and install the Jekyll gem. Running bundle init will generate a gem file for us. We can see the gem file that bundle init created is mapped back into our host file system. Specifying Jekyll in the gem file will allow bundler to install the gem for us. I prefer using the gem file instead of running gem install Jekyll from the command line because everything is captured in code, so the entire setup process can be repeated. Once bundler has finished installing the dependencies, we can inspect the gemfile.log file and see which versions have been installed. We can then update the Docker file to add in the gem file and gemfile.log to ensure each build gets the same dependency versions. Now, let's run through our bootstrapping process again to make sure our environment can be set up properly. The build process couldn't find the gem files because I was in the wrong directory within the container. Moving the working directory directive before bundling allowed the gem files to be picked up. Once the build process finishes running, our environment has all the dependencies managed by the Docker file and bundler. We can then just use the Jekyll gem to generate our initial Jekyll application files. We'll go into our container and then run Jekyll new to generate the Jekyll project files into a temporary directory. We can then move the files from our temporary directory into our project root. Let's not forget the dot files, like the git ignore file. We'll clean up by removing the temporary folder. And finally, let's bundle again to update our gemfile.log. Our host file system should have the files that were generated from within the container. Let's bootstrap our application again to make sure the entire build process is captured correctly. Be sure to run the bootstrap script from the host and not in the container. Our start script will run the Jekyll command to start serving the site from within our container. The default port is 4000. So we will be sure to map the container port 4000 to our host port 4000. Now we can bring up the service using Docker Compose. Once Jekyll is ready, we can visit localhost port 4000 to see the site. Now we can make an update to the index page and see the site reflect the change. Let's shut down the Jekyll server by pressing Ctrl and C at the same time. We need to also make sure our most recent changes have been pushed to the GitHub repository. And finally, to deploy the site to GitHub Pages, go to the repository's settings page. In the GitHub Pages section, we can select the source of the site. In this example, we will be deploying from our master branch. Once we click Save, a link to our site will be provided. On the first deploy, you might need to wait a bit for GitHub to wire everything up. And voila! Our site is published and ready to provide our information to the World Wide Web. You can also configure your GitHub page to use custom domain names like www.yourawesomesite.com. Thank you for watching, and I hope this gives you an idea of how to develop a Jekyll site inside containers and then pushing your Jekyll site to be hosted by GitHub pages.